Hey everybody, welcome back to Ready Steady Play.
Hi.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Michael.
Yeah, and we make a show about board games. This is an episode of that show about Dinosaur World, a board game about dinosaurs. So, you may well be familiar with Pandasaurus Games, the company that published Dinosaur World, because they've got a slew of dinosaur games. Well, the infamously Dinosaur Island was the first one. And then they had an expansion to that called Totally Liquid that added water dinosaurs. And that was all very sort of 90s. And then Dinosaur World is, of course, based on the second franchise of the... It's not based on that at all. But inspired by the second franchise of the famous film franchises of the... God, how do you talk about this? I don't know why we can't even mention it. We're just making it... It's just a joke. We can totally talk about it.
Yeah.
So Dinosaur Island was loosely inspired by Jurassic Park. And Dinosaur World is loosely inspired by Jurassic World.
Yes.
Which is, of course, a separate franchise that's sort of come as a reinvention, a reboot of that thing. And in that sense, Dinosaur World is sort of based in the noughties, or it's a bit more modern. But really, it's a chance for Pandasaurus Games to look at the mechanisms of Dinosaur Island and revisit them, reinvigorate them, and do something different with it. Michael and I have just played through the game, 2-player, which the playthrough should be up on the channel. So you can go and check that out if you'd like to. And
it's fun.
And yeah, do check it out. It's fun. We had a good time. So I also, it's designed by Brian Lewis, David McGregor, and Marissa Masura, and the art is by Joe Shawcross, Andrew Thompson, and Kwanchai Moria. And I apologize if I got your name incorrect. We do want to mention as well the graphic design by Stevo Torres, because graphic design is so important in these games. I think overall we had sort of, at the end of it, we had generally positive feelings, didn't we?
Yes, definitely. I came away from our playthrough, so it was our second time, wasn't it? We did a practice game through first.
Yeah, we played it once on Tabletopia, which is not quite the same, because it's the retail version of the game. We obviously here played the Kickstarter, and also because it's on the computer.
Yes. Just being careful, weren't we?
Or just taking a chance to learn the game before we filmed it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, after we'd finished playing this for reals, we both came away very quite positive about it, both having a positive experience with it.
So let's get into it, because there is, of course, a lot more complexity to it. If all you wanted to hear was, yes, it's a playable game and it's not a terribly bad time, then we've got your back.
Even Michael says it's okay.
Well, and here's the thing, right? Let's talk real quick, because what I've got here is the full on Kickstarter. It's one of those things where it's a little tricky, because when there's a big Kickstarter like this, it's not always certain whether it's coming to retail. If it does come to retail, what's going to be available and how will it differ as well, and what's the price point going to be. So this is the all-in Kickstarter from the campaign, which was actually a campaign for 2 games, which included Roar and Write, the Dinosaur World Roll and Write game. I didn't play it. I didn't buy it. I only got this part of that Kickstarter. This game came with 3 expansions as a part of that Kickstarter, and the all-in, not including shipping, was about 77 British pounds, which I think was something like $105 American dollars.
Right.
For the all-in,
right.
which is the main game plus the 3 expansions that were available on that Kickstarter campaign. Now, they've brought a retail version of the game to retail stores with some significant changes to the game, not in terms of the mechanisms, but just in terms of the content. And then there's also the expansions, which were printed as a part of that Kickstarter print run, which were brought to retail, which they may not reprint. So the expansions that you could buy at retail are the exact same as the ones that were in the Kickstarter campaign. And then there's an additional add-on pack, which was not available during the Kickstarter campaign, because what it does is it turns that retail edition into what is a very close facsimile of the Kickstarter edition, but it's extra. So that's the kind of the situation with this, and we'll talk a bit more about the differences between the 2 versions over the course of this Final Thoughts, because how could we not? So the retail edition is about £45 online. The recommended retail price is £60. So not that far. If you're buying it at RRP, it's not that far off what I paid for it.
Yeah.
Um, and
With all the expansions.
yeah, with all the expansions, right? I mean, and I've seen the Kickstarter version of the core game without the expansions going for about 55, 60 quid online. So, there's that, but that's going to run out and no longer be available unless Pandasaurus bring it back to Kickstarter. The expansions I've seen going for 15 to 18 pounds each. So if you buy the Kickstarter version online with all of those expansions, you are paying a fair bit more than what I paid.
A lot more.
And then that add-on pack is $30, which is about 20 quid, I think, something like that. But they've no plans to reprint the expansions. And the add-on pack, they have said that they are going to keep that for sale. So you will be able to buy the add-on pack in the future. So obviously we filmed this when the Kickstarter was delivered, but I'm airing this like years later when I finally edited it. And it looks as though this hasn't aged very well. The retail version of the game is still available from Pandasaurus Games for $60, and you can get each of the 3 expansion sets for $20 each. And you can also get the Kickstarter upgrade set for $30. It looks like the expansion sets and the Kickstarter upgrade aren't available anywhere but the Pandasaurus store, but you may be able to find them on the secondhand market or in a brick and mortar store somewhere. And that's partly because it's a real odd pack, but let's get into that later. So for now, that's sort of the pricing situation, the availability of the game situation. The game itself, so it was a huge campaign as well.
It was massive, wasn't it? They raised loads and loads of money.
Yeah, I mean, it was surprisingly popular, given that I feel like I never played Dinosaur Island.
Me neither.
So, and I never had played Dinogenics, the other game that's often compared to the two, because these are the games that are about building dinosaur parks. And I never played Dinosaur Island. Chris has it. He played it once.
I was going to say, I know a few people that have Dinosaur Island. They liked it, but there was one card that they really didn't like. That's how I know so many people have played it.
Yeah, so there was an interest. That's what I was going to say. Like, I thought the sort of the reception to Dinosaur Island, the impression I got, from the sort of the board game zeitgeist, was generally lukewarm. Like, people thought it was quite good, but not like superb. And then a lot of people said that turn order was hugely important, and that there was one card that would fix the turn order. So the turn order normally rotates around, and everyone gets a chance to be first player. But there was a card that would fix turn order, and it was just a random card that could come out in the game and change the game. And that would basically break it, because whoever became the first player for the duration had a huge advantage that was then unmitigated. Yeah. And that was a bit of a shame to hear, but of course that was an easy fix. Just take that one card out of the game. But, it might be a bit of a recurring theme here when it comes to things that seem a little poorly thought through.
Yeah.
So I can't really compare this directly to Dinosaur Island, but I do understand there's a lot of stuff in common, but then it adds this tile placement sort of situation, which is really exciting. And that's also sort of my favorite part of the game. But I guess the point I was going to make was I was surprised after the sort of lukewarm reception to Dinosaur Island that so many people came back for Dinosaur World. And I guess it's a sort of a credit to the marketing team over at Pandasaurus, because they had over 10,000 backers and they raised over $1 million for this and the Roll and Write, which is
I think
huge.
It's massive. I think people just love a dinosaur.
Well, the other gimmick was that a lot of people who bought Dinosaur Island at retail were very disappointed not to get the screen printed meeples. And you can see all of these nice screen printed meeples on the table camera. We've got all of our dinosaurs, and these are the expansion packs, and they're all really nice. And if you don't buy if you didn't buy Dinosaur Island as part of the Kickstarter, you couldn't get any of these.
No.
You just had one shape and no screen printing, so it's one shape and one color, solid color, and people were bummed out. They were bummed out. And I think to an extent Pandasaurus listened to their disappointment, and possibly also paid attention to the retail sales of Dinosaur Island, because they've added this add-on pack, made this add-on pack available for Dinosaur World.
Which now includes all these.
Well, exactly. That's one of the things in the add-on pack, is all of these screen-printed dinosaurs to replace the dinosaurs from the core set. We won't talk about how you'll then have, 50 or 60 plastic dinosaurs that you no longer need. Um, so yeah, I was surprised by the popularity of this campaign, but I didn't have Dinosaur Island, and I was kind of a bit bummed out to miss out on it, despite the lukewarm reception. So when I saw this, and I thought second edition, going to be better, going to fix all the problems from the original, and do a nicer production, I'll get that and give it a whirl. And you know, like I said, I've played it 4 times now, twice on the computer, and then twice in real life. And you've played it 2 times. 2 of those times I played were with you.
Yeah.
And every time I've had a good time, but I've got some concerns and some stuff that's just a little baffling. So here's an overview. It is a little confusing. So here's the sort of the brief overview of the game, because if you look at it, it would be easy to mistake this for a sort of like dice rolly, fun, sort of like adventure rompy game. It's very colorful. It's very bright. It's got dice, which are in this bag.
Oh yes.
It's got these dice, and that was fun to roll them. They're big and chunky.
Yeah.
You don't really need to roll them a whole lot, though.
And everyone's like, "Oh, funky little dinosaur."
But yeah, so we've got these cool. I can't remember what the name of this dinosaur is.
Where's the guide?
Where's the guide? It's down here on the floor.
There's an index full of them.
Oh my god!
A glossary of all
entirely
dinos.
necessary as well, unless you're a paleontologist. That is the Proceratosaurus.
Yes. Oh yes. Yes. I've seen it.
Oh yes, I knew that. This was just a test.
Oh, and this dude, I really like him. He's just like looks, I don't know, with his big.
Ah yes,
tail.
I actually remember this one, Ankylosaurus.
Yeah.
I just well, the green screen's largely evaporated him, but
No.
I remember him because he's got the big chunky tail.
Yeah, he just looks like he's a bit grumpy and having a hard day.
And he's going to take it out on you with his massive thwacker.
Yeah.
And by the way, I love this dinosaur as well, the Irritator.
Oh yeah.
I genuinely thought that was made up for the game.
Me too.
And it's not. That's its technical and scientific name.
No,
yeah, I promise you, it's real.
Is it here? It didn't look right. That's the only green one. He looked like he had his mouth shut.
Yep, no, that's him. It's the Irritator, yeah. You might be fooled into thinking that this is a really sort of light or exciting sort of Ameritrash style game of dice rolling and dinosaur danger.
You would be wrong.
You would be wrong. It's got surprisingly strong Euro sensibilities. There is actually 3 marketplaces of tiles that you'll buy. Dinosaur paddocks. These are set tiles and then a randomized building set over here. And you're going to be buying these tiles, which are going to be largely responsible for informing your strategy. You're going to be making a tableau of tiles out here and ultimately triggering them for actions. You've got all of these different currencies over here on this board. You've got DNA that you're going to have to manage. You've got obviously coins as well, which are a currency for buying tiles and things. You've got threat and security here, which you'll have to try and keep in tandem, sort of, because threat will create death in your park if it eclipses security. However, the deaths in your park are only problematic if you have a lot more deaths than everyone else. And then you've also got your Jeep quality here, which is going to basically determine a round-to-round income, as well as how many tiles you can trigger in your tile tableau. So you're sort of planning the route of your Jeep by how far it can go based on what tiles you want to trigger. So placing them based on that is really important as well. You know, and so the game, it's 5 rounds of the game, then the game ends, and each round is essentially a sort of a mad dash amongst the players to grab the dice and tiles they need from these boards in a sort of a worker placement style competitive thing. And by the way, there are, of course, a bunch of different kinds of workers, which you can see here, and each turn we're going to take turn drafting a set of these workers, so you're trying to make sure you get the workers you need, but they're also basically resources that you have to manage because you're going to use them to trigger actions.
Isn't this... Oh no, that's the DNA that gets decided, isn't it? It's
there's
cards that come out, isn't there?
Little cards that come out exactly from over here.
And aren't these specific? Like, isn't this John Hammond? And that's
well, they have so these workers also have different roles, and that's another thing. And the thing about these roles is that they give you bonuses. So you know, it's something else to sort of think about as you're going through the game. You know, you can do anything you want with any workers, but if you use them for specific things, then you'll get more mileage out of them. So do you do what you want, or do you do what's most profitable, even if it's not exactly what you want to do?
Yeah.
And so there's all these things to think about as you're managing this whole system. So it feels a lot more like a sort of a more complex Euro game that rewards these kinds of management elements.
There's so much to think about, isn't there? It's like, oh, it's not just, oh, I kind of need that dinosaur. So if I need that dinosaur, what DNA do I need? Right. How do I get that DNA with the people that have come out? Right. Once I've got that DNA, how do I build that dinosaur? Once I've built that dinosaur, what is that going to do to my threat and my security? And it's like step after step after step after step, which then turns into such
it's sort of one of those things where you have avenues to solve every problem, because once you're done with this first phase of a round where you're grabbing these tiles and you're grabbing the DNA and you're spending workers and money to do that, then you come over here to this section of your board and you can do these actions in any order. And so you can actually trigger off these actions to do more stuff, but this is private, so there's no competition now. It's just a case of sort of going over this stuff and optimizing it, and this improves your Jeep, this ups your security, this just gives you more money, but this is where you make dinosaurs, and this one here lets you convert DNA into other DNA. So if you didn't get the exact DNA you need, you can still solve that problem over here. But, do you want to spend the workers to do that, or maybe put off making dinosaurs for a turn to use those workers more profitably somewhere else? Exactly. And then once you're done that phase of these private actions, then you're going to drive your little Jeep around your park. So we've got our little Jeep over here. And we're going to basically drive this around our park, a number of steps. And every time it lands on a building, we may be able to do something on that building. But we still need workers to do that. So if we spent all our workers in the first two steps, now we can't do that. So that's
they've all gone home.
That's like, all of this stuff that you're sort of managing. So it becomes this sort of complex Euro puzzle, but it's still got these sort of elements that are really outside of your control. And that makes it feel not like a traditional Euro game, because you're going to roll the DNA dice at the beginning of every round, and that changes up that marketplace. It's not a big thing, but also the tiles are a marketplace that will move on. Mm-hmm. And but the main thing, I think, really is the deaths mechanism, because again, the amount of deaths that you can have is directly related to the amount of deaths that the person with the fewest deaths has.
Yes.
So long as you don't have loads more than the person with the least death, then you can have as many as you want. Like you will have seen in Michael and I's game, we killed an enormous number of people.
Health and safety was a bit lax at our dino parks.
Yeah, well, we just decided neither of us could be. We both sort of independently decided that neither of us could be bothered with it. And then
the Raptor dining experience got a starter, a main, and a dessert.
It became self-perpetuating, because once we both stopped dealing with it, then neither of us could be bothered dealing with it anymore. But actually, if Michael had started like halfway through the game to really up his security, I'd suddenly have to realign my strategy, because if I didn't, then I'd lose. I'd wind up with so many deaths that I would gain a bunch of negative points and lose. And it's all directly proportional, because you have to get the dangerous dinosaurs and do the dangerous things to generate the most points in the park. Mm-hmm. But, by doing that, you also generate deaths, unless you've upped your security. So then you need to find a way to do that. So this kind of comes back to the general sort of overview of the game, which is that, you can tell from the way we're describing it, it's very much a Euro-y style game. It's a management-y style game. But it is a little different. And I think that's kind of an important point to make. Because if you're the kind of person that really likes Euro-y games, and you really, really like this sort of like brain down, head scratchy, brain burnery thing, I think you might find this one a little frustrating.
Yes, 100%, because you might not be able to get the stuff that you need. You can't just isolate yourself in your own little bubble, because there's certain things that will not be in your control.
Well, and this is a great irony, which if I remember to come back to later, I will come back to it later. But yes, you can't really just focus on your own mission here. You're going to have to pay attention. Well, really just the deaths in other people's parks. But I think it's between that and the people buying the buildings you might want. There's also an enormous number of these special buildings, which are really influential in people's strategies. And in the core set, you can absolutely reliably build a strategy around these buildings, because there aren't very many of them. In the Kickstarter edition, with all the expansions, and I should note that there are 3 expansions, And Pandasaurs don't recommend playing with them all at once. And I think I do. Sort of. So, more on that later as well. But the point is...
There's one I don't think you should play with.
in the thing is, in the core set, I don't think there's enough variety of these buildings. Because you've got your A and B and C levels, and the buildings escalate in power as you go up. Mm-hmm. But there aren't enough of them. And there's also the same building in each stack. So there's like a level 1 version of a building in A, call it the Amber Farm. Yeah. There's a level 1 Amber Farm, a level 2 Amber Farm, and a level 3 Amber Farm.
Yeah.
And if you build one of them, you can't build any of the others. So you're suddenly very limited on what you can actually build and on the variety in the game. Because, you know, you're really just kind of like, there's maybe then like 10 or 15 buildings you can feasibly build. And once you've sort of seen them or played with them, then the variety really is just not there. And
it would have been nice if they were brand new buildings, or...
Well, it would have been nice if there were a lot more of them, or they were all different, or there was more variety. And I'll have a little bit more to say about that deck later on as we get into it. On the other hand, you know, I found the fact that it wasn't sort of a fully deterministic Euro quite refreshing. Because I've got a lot of heavy Euros, and they're all very deterministic. And although they're all different, and the mechanisms are different, and things work out differently, you know, I have a lot of those, and I don't have a lot of Euros where it is kind of a hybrid like this does.
Yes. I think my issue with it is, I think it's trying to be different to try and incorporate two different things. But will that, in fact, alienate the people? So if you prefer your heads down Euro, will you find that additional bit frustrating? Likewise, if you're wanting something that not as Euro, will you be a bit bummed out that it now adds these Euro elements in that means you're not interacting as much and prefer that interaction? So,
well, you're right in the sense that it does make it harder to figure out who it's for. Because it's not as clearly falling into one camp or the other. And, you know, my preference should be taken with a grain of salt because I play a ton of games and I also have a very broad taste, you know?
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to say is, you know, what we're trying to help you guys figure out is who is this for? And the answer is, I don't know, Euro people who play a lot of Euros and want something that may be a bit different-y. But keep watching the review because there's more. There's going to be more. Coming. For a start, dinosaurs. Like
everyone loves a dinosaur.
It's a great theme, right? Like the theme in this pops out in the sense that it's very prevalent. It's throughout the whole thing. It's very bright. It's very colorful. It has a very, very, very high toy factor. The dice are big and chunky. All the meeples are really like chunky and exciting. Mm-hmm. Probably not so much in the retail version, but certainly in this Kickstarter edition, all these creatures are great, and you really want to build all of these or make all of these dinosaurs.
Exactly, they all have these. The fun element is all in these different models as well, and it's the expansions add to that even more. Like with like the hybrid dinosaurs, but then also you've got these like Ice Age mammals almost.
Yeah, so you've got all these little exciting creatures you can make. And then there's also the Jeep, right? The Jeep is a really fun and sort of exciting little toy. And you get to grab that and drive that around your park and trigger your actions. And that's fun, you know, like... You know,
who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love going on a ride? It's like fulfills that theme. It does feel like you're in a theme park then, having to go around on your Jeep, getting excited. And I like how that then theme continues like in separate rounds. So then if you're going to the same, because what it does is it punishes you for going to the same attractions more than once. In the fact that the visitors that visit your park might get a bit bored seeing the same thing all the time. So what it does is it adds a real life element to it.
Yeah, we spoke about the tile placement, and the tile placement is hugely important, and also possibly the most fun part of the game. Like driving around on the tiles and triggering those actions and planning that route out is very satisfying. And there's an additional mechanism which makes that even more complex, which is this mechanism of boredom, which is a great mechanism, and it's there's a sort of caked-in sense of humor as well, because every time you trigger a tile, the boredom value of that tile increases, meaning that it's less exciting for the people on the Jeep. Because as the Jeep drives around the park, you're going to be building up excitement. But the more boring the park becomes, or if the tiles you visit are inherently boring, like the security center or something like that, then you won't elevate the excitement level, and the excitement level turns into money. You also need excitement to actually trigger boring tiles, because if you don't have excitement when you go onto the boring tile,
you can't trigger it.
You may not be able to trigger it. Exactly. So, and it's also there's just this kind of a sort of satirical humor in the fact that the boredom builds up so rapidly and is such a big issue. It's really funny. I I'm saying it's funny.
I'm bored with this Raptor dining experience already.
Yeah, it's such a funny little thing.
Like, I don't know. Can anyone really get bored?
And how quickly they get bored. It's so
like, it's so last season.
So there's a hugely exciting toy factor to this game that your much more traditional Euro wouldn't have. And that's great. And the theme really pops out. Now, whether or not the theme is sort of fundamentally linked to the mechanisms in a way that's undivorceable, no, it's not. You could retheme this and keep fundamentally basically all the same mechanisms. I mean, obviously, you could make it not a dinosaur theme park, but a regular theme park. And essentially keep all the mechanisms. Or you could make it something entirely different and probably fairly easily retheme it, like, I don't know, like a golf course where you're driving from hole to hole and building up sort of stuff around the golf course, or I don't know, even a hospital where you've got to get from ward to ward or something like that. But
patients instead of dinosaurs type thing.
But let it not be said that the fact that you can't, or the fact that you could feasibly divorce a theme from a set of mechanisms doesn't mean that it's not important or the best theme for that game. And for what it's worth, given the exciting toy factor of this game, I think that the theme is nice. I like the dinosaurs.
Me too.
It's fun. I don't have necessarily a problem with that at all.
It's definitely one of its key selling points, I think. It has done that element of it really well.
And this is why it's such a shame that the retail edition of the game doesn't have the Dino Meeples. Not only do you not have the distinct screen printing, but you don't have the distinct shapes either. So it's kind of a no-brainer to pick up the add-on pack for $30, but then you're replacing 68 Dino Meeples, and that leaves you with 68 pieces of plastic dinosaur toy that you're probably just going to put in the bin. And that's tragically wasteful.
Well, and that sort of brings us into a bit of a talk about the production, really, because the toy factor is super high with all these big chunky pieces and all of this other stuff, but it is wildly inconsistent. Like, you can see here my little tray of dice, which don't come with the game. I added those in because the game comes with these boredom tokens that are a absolute nightmare, both for knocking them around on the table and also just for picking up and putting down. So
they're so small.
They're so small, and you have to put these out onto tiles and then tick them over as you go. Yeah, so you put them into these little hash spots here, and then like every time you activate the tile, you have to put the 4 back, get the 5 or whatever, tick it up. So, I got these little dice, and we just put those out there, and then we just tick these dice up instead. And it's just much easier and quicker and easy, better to play with. But it's crazy that they thought that this was sort of like the best system for this, or they couldn't add, the dice in as an extra thing, and yet, there's the other elements of the production are so high.
Yeah, they repeated that as well with one of the expansions.
Yeah, the algae tokens are less of an issue for me because they're basically a little currency. We just sort of put them out and take them back. Like, you don't have to sort of like constantly manage these little numbers. Yeah, and you might not have to do it every round either. And the other thing is you actually create a little pool of them by your player board, so you can take them from your park and just pop them over here or put them back out if you spend them or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's not so much of an issue as ticking up the numbers where you have to put the 1 back and then get the 2 and put the 2 back and get the 3, and then you have to
quite finicky.
Well, you have to do it on every single tile that you land on as well. Including the one with the algae tokens. So, there's that. And, but also there were other issues. Some of my tokens are wildly off the bleed factor. It doesn't bother me really. And I think, they were within their margins, so it's fine. But, I know that this would certainly bother some people, I think. So
Not in the center.
some of the tokens were wildly off their bleed element, like, or just scraping to be in it. Oh, look at that. How do you like that bleed area there? Yeah.
It's so bad.
But then there was bigger issues, like these.
This is bad.
Like these player aids were wildly misprinted. You can actually see, I think, where I've glued on corrections here. I'm just showing you with the sun or the light from the cameras. Yeah. Also on the back, there's a mistake there and a mistake there as well. So, and I actually have put stickers on all the player aids, and I've gone through the rule book and done the rule book as well.
It's taking you hours.
It wasn't a fast job. But, the thing is, quality of life for me in a game is fundamentally so important. And these were problems, because the game, we made it sound complex when we were talking about it earlier. It is complex. And there's a lot of sort of like subtle nuances about when you do and don't roll, for example, dice that are very similar. Mm-hmm. And I actually wound up making this player aid myself to help you remember when to roll dice, and also when to how to deal with these other things that aren't really talked about in the rulebook. I actually had to correct it, as you can see, but these are just things that are easy to forget and
easy to get wrong.
Yeah, easy to get wrong, and they're not fun to remember. And that's the kind of that's where quality of life is so important, because I don't want to be sitting around thinking about these things. I want to focus on the fun part, which is what kind of dinosaur am I going to build?
Yeah.
Or how many deaths does everyone have? How far over these deaths am I? Those are the fun parts. This is not fun. So I just want to be able to reference this and remember it really easily. So I made these as well, but they should have made them themselves, and they should have got these right. And
that's what they should have got right more than anything. I think that's it's almost like how can you go to so much attention to detail with things like this and other little bits like the dye and just the artwork and things like that, and then get something so pivotal like a player aid so unbelievably wrong that could throw the whole balance of the game out. It just seems so, like you say, inconsistent.
It just means that your player experience is going to be people sitting here trying to internalize all of this stuff that
is wrong.
Is wrong. Yeah, they're trying to internalize it because they can't rely on these. So it's just, you've just got to remember these things, and in their defense, I suppose, pretty much, or at least half of this stuff is printed here and here on the board, right?
Yes.
So there is that.
If they've done it in the first place, it must have been there must have been discussions and research done that it was like, oh, this game would benefit from a player aid. Therefore, that's why they've done it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, exactly. they went through the process of making a player aid, so
it must have been required somewhere or discussed somewhere somehow that it's needed or would be beneficial.
I mean, I'm sure that if you're picking this up in the distant future, they've probably fixed the player aids. If they're doing another print run of the retail edition, they've probably fixed those issues as well. And my personalized player aid is made specifically for the inclusion of the expansions, so you wouldn't need that if you didn't have it. There's a few points on it that are useful reminders for the core game as well. For example, improving your security from any bonus that improves your security doesn't require you to pay for it, whereas improving it here through the private action does require you to pay for it. And these are the kind of subtle things that you want to be really clearly clarified, and were not well clarified anywhere.
Agreed.
And so that's kind of like, and that's, I think it's more noticeable because of how highly produced the game is otherwise.
Yeah. Like, that funky first player token. It's like they've clearly spent ages.
This is the retail version's first player marker, and this big chunky amber thing is the first player marker for the Kickstarter edition, which is a nice chunky toy, but I'd rather just not have this
and have correct player aids.
And have correct player aids, and I know the people who made this token are not the same people that made the player aids, but also like, you can't have accurate player aids as a stretch goal on a Kickstarter campaign, can you?
No.
It's just kind of implicit that they should be correct. It is something that should have been paid attention to. But, it's kind of the same argument I think you make with Dinosaur Island with this miserable turn-fixing card. Again, we haven't played that game, and we haven't played with that card, so we don't know what an issue it is, but there was a general consensus that was problematic, and that kind of leads us into strategies in this game as well. And again, because, coming back to like how they seem to have paid so much attention to certain things, making certain things nice, and then missed over other things. And that kind of, the tiles here, the dinosaur paddocks, these ones are attractions. You always use the same four for every game, so that's fine. But these ones over here are going to be largely responsible for your strategies in the game. The tiles you can get are going to inform how you're going to earn points and all that kind of stuff. And there's been some issues, I think, with the balance of the tiles.
Some don't seem like they seem a lot of effort for reward, and yet some seem like super rewarding for not that much effort.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of if you watched our playthroughs running the Raptor Culinary Experience, which is a 5-point thing, and every time you run it, you roll the purple dice, you get 5 points, and you generate a threat, which is the little red dot on the far side there. You also have to make a raptor to come in here and be the raptor in the Culinary Experience, which generates 3 threat. And I don't think this is worth triggering. Not for 3 excitement and 5 points. I mean, it's directly proportional to, I guess, the security in your park, but rolling the purple die for death and then also increasing your threat by 1 every time you trigger it, I think there's probably better ways to make points.
Better ways, or even like 5 points doesn't seem worth it to me. Particularly if you could build a dinosaur and get like 18 points, and go up 3 on your threat track and things like that.
Well, over here on the resort, you can pay 6 coins for 3 points.
Yeah.
And generate no deaths whatsoever. And the excitement's lower. But you didn't have to go through the rigmarole of making a dinosaur either.
Yeah. So if you find yourself with some spare cash.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's the thing is, you can do a private action that just gets you cash. So you can you can reliably get that on. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, maybe that's balanced. The thing is, dealing with security issues or dealing with deaths can be a costly experience.
I was just going to say, what it does is it takes you away from... it almost feels counterintuitive in a way, if is counterintuitive the right term. It almost seems like it's taking you away from doing the fun elements of it. Building the dinosaurs and like getting the deaths and rolling the die is sort of like the fun element, right?
I think you were actually getting onto a broader point here. So let's shelve that point, which is about what is fun to do in the game and what are you rewarded for. Like, because ultimately with any game where victory is determined by victory points, what you want is to be rewarded the most victory points for doing what is the most fun. And in this game,
yes,
making dinosaurs and driving your Jeep are the 2 things that are most fun. So you want to make dinosaurs and drive your Jeep around in order to earn points. And certain things don't necessarily reward the most... Some things feel like they don't reward points for focusing on that.
Yeah.
I think, you still have to drive the Jeep to the Velociraptor thing. You still have to make a dinosaur to do it. But it just doesn't feel like that tile is as worthwhile as having a dinosaur paddock. And that's another issue where paddocks are most useful for actually earning points. Because you see, when you make the dinosaurs into the paddock, you just get points right away. You only want to visit the paddock later on in order to gain excitement, which is how you get money.
Yes.
Excitement is important. It's also needed to trigger less exciting tiles. Like that resort we looked at that generates 1 excitement the first time you trigger it. The next time you trigger it, it's 0 because you've got boredom on it now. The next time, it'll be -1 excitement, and if you don't have any excitement, you won't be able to trigger it, which means that you need to think about that when you're sort of activating these tiles in an order. Having said that, if we're talking strictly about victory points being rewarded, the making of the dinosaurs here rewards victory points, but you don't need to visit this tile with your Jeep to earn points. You just don't. Whereas, you can visit the vault with your Jeep to earn points. And this tile is allegedly one of the more problematic tiles in the game, according to our colleagues on BGG. But we haven't had a problem with it in our games personally.
Yeah.
But, that's the other thing is it's a level C tile, and there's no adjustment for the number of B tiles you put in a game based on player count, which means in a 2-player game, you're very unlikely to see the C tiles, which is another thing that feels like it should be in the rulebook. Put in this many B tiles in a 1-player game or a 2-player game or a 3-player game or a 4-player game, so that you reach the C tiles at a certain point in the game. But that marketplace, is going to be directly dependent on how many people buy tiles and all this kind of stuff. The fact that there's not a consideration for that, again, it's like a little sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
But this tile lets you trade 3 DNA for 2 points, and you can do it as many times as you want, right? When you visit this tile. And it's just 3 basic-ass DNAs as well.
Yeah, it's not even...
Now, it is a seed level one, so you're only going to get this at the end of the game. So you can't, build a whole strategy around this tile. But if you think about it, you could trade, 6 DNA there for 6 points. And then if you're building a Dilophosaurus here, it's 4 for 4 points, but you get 2 threat.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're going to have to deal with that for the whole game. Here, again, 4 for 5, but this green one might as well really count for 2, because that's a luxury DNA. So actually this is 5, that's 6, So this is a really good little earner, and you get 3 points just for building it, and it's just super easy to trigger.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, again, it's not exciting, so you have to deal with that, but it just doesn't feel quite right in its balance, and given, the inclusion of that card in the first game and everything else we've said so far, it just feels like the balance is a little
bit off.
It's a little bit off.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a shame, because there's clearly a lot of work that's gone into this, and it might sound like we're down on it, but I think that's because we've had fun playing.
I think exactly right. I think you're pointing it out as a bit of a disappointment, only because it's a good game, but it could be a great game.
Yeah, it could have been a great game. It could have been really, really tight. And instead it doesn't feel tight at all. And the thing is, the deaths overall is fun. I actually really like the death system, where basically whoever has the fewest deaths discards them, everyone else discards the same number, and then you count up what everyone who has any left counts them up and gets negative points. I think that's actually a great sort of mechanism.
Catch-up mechanic, almost.
Catch up, it's sort of a what it is it's a push your luck mechanism, really, because you can ignore deaths and just not worry about security and use your actions to just build your park and score loads of points and go ham, but you're going to have to pay for it in the end. And so the question is, how ham do you want to go? And do you want to just keep making T-Rexes, beeping T-Rexes? Do you want to just keep making T-Rexes and scoring lots and lots of points, but getting lots of deaths? Or do you want to be a bit more sensible, maybe? No, you don't. Nobody wants to be sensible.
Boring.
And it's just a really fun... And it's a little amusing that as sort of corporate business owners, we really sort of only think about deaths insofar as how much is it going to affect us, our business at the end of the day,
but I think it's pivotal that you understand that.
Yeah, so I think in our first game, Michael didn't quite realize how... quickly how the difference in deaths, it's an escalating sort of situation, right? So at the end of the game, you're going to have you're going to lose the points at the bottom here based on the excess deaths you have at the top, right? So in a 2-player game, only 1 person will lose points. In a 3-player game, 2 people will lose points. But you can see that 5 deaths is 5 points, but then it starts to escalate. Actually, 1 and 2 deaths are both 1 point that you lose. But then for 6, it's 7, and then when you get to 10, you lose 15 points. And for every death over 10 you have, it's an additional 3 points per death. Now, in one of the games I played, I had, I think, something like 12 deaths. So I was 2 over the maximum. And I still beat the person who had no deaths. I didn't win that game, actually, but... the person who had no deaths, or the fewest deaths, 3 or 4 deaths, before they discarded, who discarded all of their death. They didn't win. So it's definitely not like a mechanism that can be incorporated into your strategy, but you have to know.
You just got to aware, because I wasn't, and I thought it was 1 for 1. So I think I was something like I think I was like 12 deaths, wasn't I? So I lost 18 points, or maybe I was 11 and I lost 18 points. And because I lost 18 points, that was in our first game, wasn't it? And I was about 10 then behind you, because I thought I'd done it or something like that, or I just missed out. And it's like, nope, you're miles behind. And I was like, damn it, I did not do it. But then again, I think that's just a me.
Well, that's a teaching thing. So if you're teaching the game to someone, just be, you have to be clear about the deaths.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, as a mechanism, I really, really like it. And I really like the boredom mechanism. I think that's
consequences for deaths.
Fun. But I think that the thing is, it's like the integration of the expansions is kind of a problem, because you're supposed to only play with one at a time. But here's the thing, like, it's a game that takes up a lot of space on the table. The setup time with this insert is great, but without the insert, I imagine would be longer, although probably not like, egregious. I don't think that would be a big issue.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think I wouldn't want to play it with more than 2 people, because the one of the, I don't know if it's a selling point, but one of the things they make a big deal out of is that each round you play the first round competitively, because you're getting essentially drafting things, either the dice or the tiles, and that's competitive because there's these set marketplaces and you might not get what you want, so you're drafting things, and that's competitive, and everyone's doing that competitively. And then after that, you're doing your private actions and your Jeep tour, and that's not competitive at all. And it says in the rulebook this is simultaneous, so you can all do this simultaneously.
Yeah.
But what happens is that, so in the show, Michael and I made the playthrough, you can see that we are doing it one at a time, because we're on camera, and we can't be talking over each other, and we want to make sure you guys can follow the game.
Exactly.
But in real life, essentially what happens is you do this sort of like collaborative bit, or not collaborative, competitive bit that feels like you're playing a game with other people. And then you just kind of sit here and solve this little puzzle on your own for a while and report some numbers at the end. You're like, oh, I've got 17 excitement and 5 deaths, please. Or if you take the deaths, you wouldn't even bother mentioning that. And then everyone just goes, has everyone finished their Jeep tour? Great. Back to the start of the game. And it's kind of like...
Which again feels very... anticlimactic. It almost feels like, I could be sat on my own doing this.
Yeah, I could almost be sat on my own doing this, So, and, you can make it a much more social experience. You can sort of sit and watch everyone's Jeep tour and then be like, hey, look at my Jeep tour, If that's how you want to play the game, that's entirely within your control. So is it a problem that needs to be fixed? Not really, but also it's obviously not making the most use out of the players, because it's trying to sell the fact that it makes no use out of multiple players at that stage.
Yeah.
It does require them to play the game, because you need them for the first phase of a round, but then the second 2 phases, they might as well not be here. Yeah. And that's kind of like problematic for me, because if I've got 3 players, then I'm not going to pick this. I'm going to pick a game where we're playing, where there's more interaction. And that means that really I only want to play this at 2 players. So that means it's going to get to the table less, and I'm going to get less mileage out of it,
Mm-hmm. I forgot to mention, it was ironic. The irony. It seems like a very interactive game, or it seems like a very bombastic and fun game. And I was like, well, that's very ironic. And it was ironic because of the simultaneous play. Basically, like, you spend 2/3 of the game not interacting with other people and just kind of sit silently for like 20 or 30 minutes doing 2 rounds of the game and then report a number at the end. That's why it was ironic, and then I totally forgot to mention it later when we talked about that.
But the other thing is, then there's the solo version, which I haven't really looked at. I haven't played it. I did look at it briefly, and it does look like it's a little different. You're trying to sort of achieve objectives. There are some objectives in this, but they're just scoring objectives. So they're sort of like, if you have enough T-Rexes, you get some points, things like that.
Yeah.
But there's actual, like, sort of set objectives you have to achieve in the solo mode in order to win, which is really interesting. But what's really interesting is that the dinosaurs escape and run around the park.
See, that sounds fun.
Yeah, and you have to capture them and put them back in the paddocks.
Wow.
That sounds great. Why isn't that in the game?
Yeah. That's only if you're playing on your own.
That's only if you play on your own.
Oh, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that sounds great. And I kind of wish that had been implemented into the actual game. And I kind of also wish that... I don't know, like, there was more player interaction during the second two phases of a round, because it's so weird that...
I don't know, I imagine I'd be like, yeah, that'd be fun about player interaction, and then I'd be like, no, leave my park alone, don't mess with my park. Don't touch me, I'm alright here on my own.
But it
Let's
doesn't
just
have to
chat.
be negative player interaction, you know, it could be like, I don't know, trading dinosaurs, or maybe like you could agree to breed them and then you both get a benefit or something, you know?
Exactly.
Like, there could be all these different ways to sort of improve player interaction
Just
in that.
thinking of our playthroughs.
That's because I like cutthroat, vicious games. But,
no, you just like teasing me.
that's also true. But, you know, it
fun.
does feel like, you know, it's sort of like the absolute definition of simultaneous play. And it just feels like it very much boils down to, like, reporting numbers.
Yeah,
you know?
It does. It feels very, I don't know, it feels just a bit too admin and a bit too secretarial.
Well, it takes what should be really exciting, which is running a dinosaur park, and turns it into, like, this really sort of, like, administrative businessy thing.
Yeah, it's
You
like,
know?
oh. Yeah.
I have generated 16 points of excitement. I have incurred 10 deaths.
Numbers.
Well, I just feel like playing it with more than two would be a waste. And the only reason I'm playing it with one other person is because the solo mode's basically a different game.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. You don't get the solo mode if you buy the retail game. I'm sorry, it's in the add-on pack. And that means that if you're only interested in the game as a solo game, you're going to have to shell out the $30 to get all the extra dinosaurs,
which you might not want.
which you might not care about. I mean, you know, the thing is, like, the add-on pack, I actually think, like, overall is a pretty good buy for the retail edition, because you get the nice dinosaurs, which is fine, but you also get some more of these building tiles, and you also get the solo cards. Although if all it had in it were the cards and the tiles, then they could probably have made it cheaper. I don't know why they had to bundle that with the dinosaurs, other than I guess they didn't want to produce 2 packs.
Maybe everyone just reached out and was like, why can't we have the dinosaurs? They're cool.
But I mean, they could have been a separate pack, right? Like, if you just wanted the screen printed dinos, you could have that, because they don't add any gameplay.
No.
Whereas the tiles, at least you can use those in the solo game.
But people might have had so much interest in it, they were like, oh, well, we'll just throw them in. Like, people clearly want them. We'll just add them in.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they could have made him a second add-on pack, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, they've only grouped it with the other stuff because they want to. It's cheaper for them to make one pack. Yeah. And if they're thinking that people who are interested in anything are going to buy this pack.
Yeah.
Anything in the pack are going to buy the pack. Like, it's good that the stuff's available at least, and it's good that there's a pack to get people that stuff so that they're not, you know, it's not like Iwari where if you didn't back the deluxe edition of that, you're never going to have the co-op mode or the solo mode. Too bad. You know,
seems a bit cutthroat.
it is, you know, a real shame, and I hate it when they do that. You know, Chris and I have said this often, actually, that we really don't like it when game mechanisms are made Kickstarter exclusive. Like, make it all luxury stuff, you know, make it the screen printed dinos and things like that, but don't make the sort of the gameplay mechanisms Kickstarter exclusive. Then there's the expansion packs. Michael wasn't a big fan of the water pack, which has you well, it's because it's got you cleaning up algae in the water paddocks, right?
Now, I'm normally one for cleaning, don't get me wrong.
You do like cleaning.
I'm good at it, but for me, so what happens is at the end of each turn, is it the start of each turn or the start of your Jeep turn or something?
At the start of a round. See, this is why I had to make this thing, because it's like, when do you roll the algae die?
So you have
it looks like what any of the other dice. Let me reference my chart.
Oh yeah, it's algae. You roll this die, and it could be that you actually don't get any, which Mike did loads.
I think you're misremembering this a bit, but I definitely got luckier with it than Michael.
I'm being hyper, but what do you call me? You call me, is it
hyperbolic?
Yeah, I'm very guilty of this. And I'm so, like, I always get the double. Look, see, I'm throwing it and I get a double.
You threw it twice there.
Yeah, I got one the first time. I never get a blank.
You never get the blank.
It's like life knows I like cleaning. But then you get stick 2.
Here's a water dinosaur paddock. So you put your algae out in the water dino paddock.
And what you've got to do is you've got to spend one of these guys
Yeah, and you only get 8 a turn.
And you only get 8 a turn. And literally, one of these removes a 1 token. And it just seems like you're constantly having to mop up the algae before you can even think about what you need to do with your strategy to actually play the game. Because if you leave this algae here, it's really detrimental.
Yeah, so the thing about the 8 actions is that they are very limited. It does feel very limited, and you can keep people between rounds, and sometimes it's very sort of useful to do that. But the thing about the algae is that it reduces your overall excitement in your park. Yeah, so what happens is before you gain money from your excitement level, you will lose excitement for every algae in your park, right? So, and if you can't lose excitement because you haven't generated enough, then you lose victory points. So it's, I think it actually worked out to be less punishing than we thought. I think it sounds on the surface like it's very punishing, but actually you can generate quite a lot of excitement, and I think you can absorb the algae to an extent, but we did find ourselves, certainly in our first play with the water expansion, feeling quite compelled to make sure we visit it and clean it regularly.
Exactly.
Like having one algae there is not a problem, but then if you roll this double, it suddenly becomes a problem. And you roll this at the beginning of the round, so you can prepare for it, but it can upset plans that you had in what is, fundamentally, at least in its construction, quite a tight Euro game. But, like I said, then the tiles feel a little imbalanced. The marketplaces fluctuate a lot. You're rolling these DNA dice all the time, and it doesn't feel like a tight Euro after that. It's like the core mechanisms all feel like tight Euros, and then everything else feels like not a tight Euro.
Yeah.
And this kind of further expands that a little bit. And, it potentially limits the scope of your strategies because you have less workers to use to develop those strategies. You're forced to clean the water paddock all the time. One of the plus sides is that it gives you endgame scoring goals, which I think are really cool.
Yes.
So all of the water dino tiles have an in-game scoring bonus on them, and that can help direct you as well, because when we didn't play with these, it was a bit like, okay, where do I start?
You just got to look at the objective cards almost, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, there is enough. There's a draft of tiles at the beginning, so you'll have picked 3 tiles to start with. That could give you an indication of what your strategy should be. There's 3 objective tiles out on the board here. We mentioned these already, but I should have got one out to show you guys. But, this one's going to reward you points. If you manage to build all 4 attractions, then you can claim this, and the first person to claim it gets 4, and then 2 and 1. So these will give you some guidance on what you should be doing as well. But the algae, the way the algae just costs workers to clean up or reduces excitement does feel, again, a little bit like it's not being integrated as well as it should have. I feel...
It's a bit too punishy.
A little bit too punishy, or like maybe the way you deal with the algae shouldn't detract quite so much on the way you can deal with the other mechanisms in the game. There were water dinosaurs added into the original game in the Totally Liquid expansion, which I think came from the second Kickstarter for that. Do they have 2 Kickstarters for Dinosaur Island? I mean, that's what kind of blows my mind, is like, this is the third Kickstarter, or even if it's not the third, it's the second. But it's also the second edition of the game. I'm amazed it's not really, really, really tight. Even if it's not supposed to be really tight, the markets are intended to fluctuate and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm amazed it doesn't feel tighter and more integrated. I mean, again, you're not expected to play with all the expansions together.
No. You wanted to, didn't you? You were like...
Yeah, well, I've done it, and I played with just the hybrids and the Ice Age guys as well. And I almost feel kind of like...
You were missing it then.
Yeah, well, I feel like they add a variety that's much needed, I really feel like without them, the game feels like it's missing something. But then with them, it feels like highly randomized. So what you kind of get is like the worst of both worlds, where it's not as integrated as it could have been. And if it were integrated entirely and then just really tightened up, it would have been spectacular. Like, because the ice expansion adds points around the outside of the tiles, and now suddenly you have to think about rotating the tiles because the tiles next to it is more important. But then it also like breaks a fundamental rule of the game, which is you can't have 2 paddocks next to each other. So it almost feels like, why call it an ice paddock? Just call it like a mammal enclosure, because they're not even dinosaurs anyway.
No.
And it's just these like little things. Oh yeah, here's another thing that blows my mind. So these expansions are clearly color coded. This is blue, this is white, this is yellow. In the Kickstarter campaign, the original Kickstarter campaign, all of these hybrids were black, actually, and the die was black as well.
Oh, really?
And they've reprinted it yellow, I guess, for whatever reason. But you can see on all the tiles they've left the black graphic for the die. So it shows a black die on all the tiles. And that's just another little sloppy thing. And I'm just kind of like, guys, like, come on. Because I actually like this game. I like this game. The toy factor's through the roof. I have so much fun with it. I love the dinosaurs. I love building the park. I love orienting the tiles and putting them next to each other and trying to plan the route and worrying about the excitement. And like every time I trigger the route, I'm like, oh, I've put that in the wrong place. And then halfway through the game, you have to move the entrance to the park and the Jeep will start from somewhere else entirely different. And that's exciting. And
you can't go the same route because then it'll get boring. And it's like, ugh.
God, yeah, there's so much good stuff in this game, and they've let themselves down on so many levels as well, and this simultaneous play thing is so weird, and if you like that, then this is actually a game that you'd probably really get a kick out of. But also, if you don't like that or you don't care about it, it's just kind of a weird oddity. And I definitely wouldn't want to play this, everyone just heads down. Like, I want to see what route you take your Jeep on. I want to see what tiles and combos you're triggering. I want to be involved in the game you're playing because we're playing a game together. And that's the thing. It's not even like, a game with low player interaction, say like Terraforming Mars or like Everdell, which are tableau builders. I don't know why I conjured a tableau builder necessarily, but like just a game with really low player interaction, because you're still not playing simultaneously, so you're still like aware of what other people are doing. And this game actually has kind of more interaction in a sense because you have to be aware of the deaths.
Exactly.
And you have to be keeping an eye on people's deaths and their threat levels and their security levels. So it encourages you to pay attention to what other people are doing. But then it's like, but also for 2/3 of a round, do your own thing, because if you don't and everyone else is, they're all going to finish their stuff and then they're all going to have to sit and watch you do it and you're going to feel like a dumbass because they did it already.
Yeah.
And you're holding up the whole game now. It's so bizarre.
I agree with you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked this game. I would definitely like to play it again. It had such a chunky puzzle to try solve, and like you say, there's these tiny little tweaks that if they'd tightened them, it could be really an epic game.
And all of the money, all of the value is here. Like all the art, all the design, all the components. Like I said, there are issues with the components, like the boredom tokens that needed some thinking through from a sort of a practical term, because it really slows the game down if you're putting those in and out all the time. It's a real pain in the ass. Maybe that's why they made that simultaneous. I don't know. To speed that up, because otherwise the game would go on forever. Yeah. But there's gotta be better ways. So, and that's the thing. Like, so it's just development time, and maybe it's just that cycle. Maybe it's just we need to publish this game. Get this done. I would have waited for a tighter experience personally, but as it stands, I still want to play it, and I'm still happy to play it.
I would totally play this again.
Yeah,
definitely.
But not at 3. I don't, and that's the problem. The death mechanic really is much more exciting at 3. The death mechanism is good at 3, but
I think I would definitely play at 3.
I just think the ratio's not quite right. Like I just think like it's so much easier to get a game to the table with 2 people, but 3 people getting together to play a game. It depends obviously on your situation, your group, and everything like that. But like for me, when I've got 3 people, give me a game that is really going to improve with 3 people. Whereas a third person for this doesn't like add a whole lot.
No.
Other than we've got one other person to hang out with, but then like we could be playing something that makes much more of that.
Yeah.
And some games require 3 people, so let's play one of those.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's going to wrap up our final thoughts here, guys. Like, I don't have much more to say on it. I'm keeping it for now. I'd like to play it more times.
I think we should end on, and like you said, we were wrapping it up. I think the key thing here to take away is that we did enjoy it, and we did have a positive experience whilst playing it, and we would like to play it again, which are all like key ticks in its box.
Yeah, but I'll tell you why I really, really struggle to recommend it, if at all, is because I think it will be really hard to find this version of the game.
Yeah, that's true.
Every time we've played, we've integrated 2 of the expensive expansions. Well, no, that's not true. The first time we played the retail edition, essentially. But that was on Tabletopia, and it wasn't ideal. And I think we're really talking about the physical copy we played. The physical game, when we say we really enjoyed it. The physical game. When I've played it physically, I've always had these 2 expansions and all the Kickstarter tiles integrated. And in addition to that, the add-on pack as well. So, I think, like, buying it at retail at 45 quid, that's hard to recommend. Because it's more expensive and it takes up a lot of space on the table.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily a problem, of course, but it means it's harder to get to the table. You need to have a table big enough for the game, and then also it's at 2 player if you've got 3 players around a table big enough to play this, then there's so many better games that you could be playing with that situation.
Yeah.
Like Hansa Teutonica is way cheaper, and just
you love Hansa Teutonica.
Yeah, but it's like it's the same. The reason I went there is because it's a crunchy Euro with amazing player interaction, and it's available now, and it's like £10 cheaper, and it plays great with 3. I mean, admittedly, the theme is like way drier, and nobody's going to look at that and go, I want to play that. They're going to look at this and go, I want to play this, because it's visually so enticing and so seductive, but it doesn't deliver like
a mermaid. Enticing, and then you disappear into the sea, never to be seen again.
Yeah, or like you want to take the makeout session to the next step, and you're suddenly very disappointed, Yes, this is the mermaid of board games. I'm ready to move to third base, and it's not what I wanted after all.
Oh,
I really liked the tip of the iceberg, but now I'm getting below the water. I'm getting increasingly disappointed. All right, so it's really hard to recommend, but I think if you have the opportunity to play it, especially if one of your friends already has this version, I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I think give it a shot for sure. You'll probably have a good time. Or if you see someone selling the All-In Kickstarter secondhand, grab it and give it a shot, especially if you mostly play 2-player games with your partner at home.
Yeah.
Like, this would probably be a great little game to a great huge game to play in those situations. But at that price, brand new, at that don't know if I can recommend that.
Would I expect people to pay £60 for this? No.
If you bought the retail copy at RRP for £60, I think you'd be very disappointed.
Yeah, particularly with, like you say, what else you can get for that money. So
there's many good 2-player head-to-head 2-player games you can get for like 25 quid, and then you can use your leftover 35 quid to get Hansa Teutonica big box.
There you are. There's another plug.
Well, I'm just saying, again, like if you've, but it depends on your collection as well. If you've played Hansa to death and you're looking for something different, then it's still not this, but I could recommend other things. The Kickstarter has not benefited this.
No.
It's not made the most of being a Kickstarter. And at retail, it's kind of an oddity, and I don't know who to recommend it to. And that's the end of that.
And that's the
but
final thought.
We have enjoyed our playthrough. We don't regret our time with it, and we would play it again at least a few more times.
So in conclusion, a mixed bag.
A very mixed bag, just like the production value of the game.
Love it. Cool.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this content, please consider checking out our Patreon page, which is how we continue to be completely free to whinge like this for 40 minutes.
Exactly. One day I'll get paid. No, I'm not kidding.
But, if you're not in a position to support the Patreon, you can always support us for free by subscribing, sharing the content, telling people you like it, like the videos, and just watching the show. Thanks for being here, guys, and we'll see you all in the next video.
See you soon. Take care. Bye.